Let's give a nice welcome to Representative Mike Conaway. You bet.
Jim, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Carter, thank you for your patience on the change in the schedule kind of thing working. I appreciate that. Clayton Williams is attributed one of the best lines about water. He said, "Whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting." And Jim said I was a CPA. We are not funny. We're not nearly as funny as engineers, as exhibited by the lack of reaction in the audience. I'm thinking you guys are totally asleep out there. Your eyes look open, but can't see any reaction whatsoever. But it's good to be with you. The three main competing uses of water out here, obviously agriculture, oil and gas, and then municipal uses. Jim mentioned the Farm Bill. We do have extensive rural development title there that assists smaller communities with grants and loans on their water and sewer projects and trying to make sure that rural America has the kind of resources they need for the municipal use of it. And obviously they have a competing use with agriculture. So the three have got to coexist, and this conference is a terrific step in the right direction. I told Steve I was going to introduce him this morning, and a panicked look kind of crossed his face. Steve and I have known each other since 1979 when I moved to Midland, Texas. Our sons are the same age. We have two boys each each pair graduated from middle high school and good buds. Our wives were good buddies, and so I, made the comment that I know some good things about him that I could tell the audience. And he's looking a little bit panicked. And then I also said, however, you will have the microphone after I do, and so I'll be really discreet about what I say, hoping that you'll be discreet because I can't get the microphone back once you've taken it to deal. But Steve is also a long-term friend since 1979, as I mentioned. He's a consulting engineer in the CO2 and soil recovery businesses across a wide range of projects across several decades, I guess now, and going on. He also is a good policy advisor for public policy issues related to CO2 and enhanced oil recovery and other issues with respect to the oil and gas business, not only here in the state, in Austin at the state level, but Steve also is well known on the federal level with respect to public policy issues that surround the CO2 issue in that regard. He is a Bachelor of Science degree from Texas A&M and somehow wound up with a master's degree from Purdue. I don't know how he got to Purdue from Texas, but he did. And he and his wife, Sally, have two sons and five granddaughters? Five granddaughters, and so that's why Stevie's still working, because there are going to be a lot of weddings and things that they're going to have to do to be able to afford five granddaughters. But it's a great pleasure for me to introduce now our next speaker, Steve Melzer. Stevie.
Wow, that was quite an honor. I had no idea. This is going to lead up to some things that I've got a group I'll introduce here in a minute that helps me, and I'm just kind of the spokesman for them, but we've been doing some things that I think are new and different. Maybe first time we'll air some of these today, so I've been looking forward to this day for quite a while, and maybe it'll help us with the water situation. But we come at it from a strange place. We started out in CO2 EOR, as Mike said, and we're studying below the oil water contacts, trying to figure out that, and ended up doing some things about residual oil zones. That kind of led us to horizontal depressuring of those zones, which has led us to think about shales. And so there's kind of the pathway that is the background for this talk today. So I'll start out with several perplexing questions that we all have, especially in the upstream side of things. And then I'll talk about what I think are two different unconventional plays in the Permian Basin, and really starting to be around the world. And I'll define that for you. Then a quick look at the horizontal St. Andrews play. Some of you may be familiar with that. I suspect most of you are not. And then talk about some analogs to that play that are both here in the U.S. And around the world. And then what kind of leads into the really pertinent part of this meeting, this conference, is a transmissive fracture case history and some of the tools that we're using to figure out if they're transmissive and what that means in terms of water cuts and seismicity possible. and then close out with what we call crustal connections, the Earth's crust, and the sour wells in the shale. I don't know if any of you have had that experience, but many of the operators have mentioned that they have a sour well now and then in the shales, and most of them, of course, are sweet oil. But we think we've got a theory for that too now. And then we'll kind of close with where should we go from here? Because a lot of this is still kind of on the speculative realm, and so there's some good research opportunities here, I believe. I want to give some thanks to some people. Some people are in the audience here. David Vance, raise your hand there. David is a biogeochemist, and he's, well, serendipity for me, but maybe not for him, that he discovered some of the reasons for the sour oil that we have in the San Andres, and we'll talk about it in the shales. It has to do with anaerobic bacteria that are present in the subsurface, and the correlations there are so, we're right about this, and a lot of people are still skeptical, but 100% convinced that this is where our sour oil comes from. And it's really David's contribution. I did not see Bob, Dr. Bob Trenum. He may be teaching this morning or something, but he's been with us the whole way, and nobody knows more about the Permian Basin geology than Dr. Bob, and he's been immensely helpful through all of this. And then Bruce Warren was going to try to come down. He's from Crown Geochemistry, which has innovated some new mud logging techniques, which I will lean on real hard this morning. And then Craig Pearson. I think Craig's here. I hadn't seen him yet, but we talked about him yesterday. Former chief seismologist for the Railroad Commission, and moved out here to be head of the District 8, the director of the District 8 here in Midland. And they wore him out, so he's working half-time and turned the gavel over to the next guy. But he's been immensely helpful as well. And then I'll use some slides from Russell Hall. And I don't think Russell's here, but he's analyzed our play in the San Andres quite well, and I'll use some of his slides. And then about a year and a half ago, Farhan Allah Muhammad from Schlumberger and I teamed up to write up a case history, which I'll show, and presented that in the Woodlands last January at the Hydrofrac conference. So those questions. I've had this happen to me 3 or 4 times now, where a company will say, how can this well be a sour oil well and the next one over is a sweet oil well? And they're landing at the same depth or the same length of lateral. One produces sour oil and gas, and one produces sweet oil and gas. So we'll come back to that question at the end. And have you ever asked anybody how to avoid drilling into a transmissive fracture, and how you know it's there, and what's the best way to avoid a high water cut well? And we've all seen through 3 days the criticality we're worried about in all this water disposal. So if we can minimize the water we produce, maybe that's one way to address the problem. And so the other one is the one that happened in Oklahoma, north central and northeastern Oklahoma, where they made so much water with less than 10% oil cuts in some of those plays up there. They put it in the Arbuckle, and obviously the rest of the world found out about it with the earthquakes they induced. And so what they had to do is they had to go to those operators and say, you can only inject a certain amount of water. And so they restricted them. Obviously changed the water disposal industry's economics, and we may have a little bit of that on our horizon. A lot of you have talked to me about that during the course of the two and a half days. And sometimes even some of those wells get shut in. So this is a matter of dire need.